Okay, this video is going to be a little different than my normal story type videos. I'm trying to get this out pretty quickly so I won't really have time to do all the embellishing that I normally do. As we all know, in the 9.2.0 PTB, the developers pitched something pretty crazy. The public test build gave us a peek at what looked like, basically, a different game, and we were all bracing for Dead by Daylight to be completely changed. But now that that patch is live, in true behavior fashion, we get a compromise, kind of. A patch-altering compromise where many of the most talked about features have been delayed or even cancelled for this release. We all know that I'm talking about the infamous slugging and tunneling changes that they announced, but were pretty quickly cancelled thanks to community feedback. So today, we're going to break down every relevant detail, minus lore and bug fixes, of what actually made it into the 9.2.0 patch. We'll kick things off with the brand new chapter, talking about the new killer, the Krasue, and the new survivor, Vee Boonyasak? Then we'll get into the unofficial centerpiece for this patch, the absolutely shocking and controversial rework for the shape that is redefining this chapter. After that, we'll cover all the other killer adjustments, perk changes, and map updates when it comes to the palettes. Notably, I'm going to try not to beat the tunneling and slugging PTB changes further into everyone's minds, as we all know that horse has been dead for quite a little while now. However, try to stick around to the end, or skip around the timestamps as you'd like, as I'm going to do my best to figure out how all these changes may shake up the meta going forward. And of course, all of this is my opinion. Not only is it my opinion, but it's a rough and somewhat rushed look at what the future might look like. I would love to make an update video in the future talking about how the patch settled in. So please put your opinions on the new patch down below and let me know if an update video sounds like something you'd be interested in. First up, we have the new killer, featuring the Krasue. She's a dual-form killer whose core mechanic is the leech meter, which allows you to damage the survivors with a tentacle lunge attack, and applies the broken status effect at stage 2. If you saw my PTB video on the Krasue, she works basically the same. You can spit a projectile at survivors that will infect them. Once they are infected, your flying head mode will be able to damage them. Survivors can heal by finding glowing fungus around the map, although this healing does take some time, and if they get damaged during the healing process, then the healing goes away. Notably, when I say healing here, I mean curing them from the infection, not actually healing a health state. Her head form is also very good for traversal, as you can move forward very quickly to cover area. Her perks are all about aggression. The suggestion I put forward on Wandering Eye seems to have gone through. The range was increased to 20 meters from 16. Wandering Eye is a perk where when you enter a chase, you can see the aura of injured survivors around you. I initially felt that 16 was kind of low for the PTB, so I'm glad to see it was increased. Her perk Ravenous is okay, but the exposed effect relies on you finding survivors quickly, and I think there are better options like Friends Till the End. Realistically, the timer is too short to get multiple survivors with it in most situations, and Friends Till the End provides the same exposed duration with information as well. Not only that, but the exposed happens multiple times per match. Overture of Doom is a cool concept for chaos builds, but by design, it can lead to the survivors tracking the hex's location. I definitely think it's interesting, but not groundbreaking. Overture of Doom curses the furthest generator away from it, and if a survivor works on that generator for 5 seconds, it activates the curse. This transfers your terror radius to the curse generator and makes you undetectable. Again, it's okay, great for chaos, but a little mid in my opinion. Out of the 3 perks, I think her best in my opinion is probably Wandering Eye for keeping pressure up and getting more game knowledge. On the survivor side, we have Vee Boonyasak. I'm never going to get that right. I believe she comes from the same geographical location as the Krasue, being Thailand. Her perk Road Life was buffed from the PTB, now requiring about 2/3 as many charges to activate its 100% healing speed bonus. I'm not thrilled to see more healing perks in the current state of the game, but it doesn't seem to be groundbreaking or meta-shifting at first glance. Her perk 1, 2, 3, 4 is still kind of mid in my opinion because of how inconsistent skill checks are. However, with a dedicated skill check build, you can absolutely destroy generators with it, which is concerning. Otherwise, it's a fun emote perk like the loot we got from the Dungeons & Dragons chapter. Finally, for her perks, Ghost Notes is the same as the PTB version. It's a perk that I'm excited to use as Survivor and terrified to face against as the killer, so take that for what it's worth. I think it's awesome in concept, but you basically have no scratch marks all game if you pair it with lightweight. This can make mind games at tall loops much more powerful. Alright, let's get into the single biggest change in this patch. The shape has been fundamentally altered. He now has 3 distinct modes that you can switch between mostly at will: Stalker, Pursuer, and Evil Incarnate. The most critical difference is that you no longer need to stalk survivors to swap from stage 1 to stage 2. Also notably, survivors can never run out of stalk, so you can never run out of your power mid-match. Being able to freely swap from stage 1 to stage 2 is a massive shift. You can just toggle between being undetectable in Stalker mode and having a better chase potential in Pursuer mode, whenever you want. This gives him a level of map control he's never had. You can sneak up on a generator, and the second a survivor runs, you can flip to Pursuer mode. Notably, the survivors can't deny you your power by being very aware of stalk from the jump. Myers has always been a killer that's really weak in the early game and needs a good start to take off. The Stalker and Pursuer mode should do a lot for him. And speaking of Pursuer mode, it got buffed quite a bit from the PTB. His vault speed in Pursuer mode went from 15 to 20%, and his other action speeds were also brought up to 20%. This makes him so much more lethal at loops, and that 20% vault speed buff also extends to his tier 3 Evil Incarnate. But his trade-off is the Evil Incarnate. It's much less powerful in my opinion than his original version. Survivors are no longer exposed during Evil Incarnate, meaning you can no longer just M1 them to get them on the ground. Instead, he gets a new special attack called the Slaughtering Strike. This has turned him into what the community is largely memeing as Dash Slop. Whether this is or is not Dash Slop, I don't want to get into. The changes as a whole are inarguably a buff. Notably, however, there are still weaknesses in the kit that I feel like need to be buffed out. The lunge duration for the Slaughtering Strike, for example, was nerfed down to 1.5 seconds from 2 in the PTB. We'll see how that affects him, but given all the work needed to get to tier 3, this doesn't thrill me. In my opinion, he kinda needed that extra range as survivors get so many warnings that his tier 3 is coming. Because it wasn't called out in the notes, we have to assume he still has the same issues from the PTB. The loud noise notifications when tier 3 is ready and the long delay animation after you activate it. On top of that, the power decaying when it's not full makes the lunge duration nerf just feel unnecessary. Aside from his Evil Incarnate being very weird, it is official, Tombstone Myers is dead. Rest in peace. However, we do still get a small remembrance of Tombstone Myers in the fact that he can mori survivors that are on their death hook if he catches them in his final tier. Overall though, the shape is no longer restricted to being overly weak normally or overly strong with Tombstone. He's a versatile mode-switching killer. This isn't the simple Myers we knew, this is a complex killer with a totally new identity. We'll have to wait and see how we feel about him after getting a few dozen hours of matches under our belts. Now, let's talk about the other changes. As mentioned in the intro, the huge anti-tunneling systems were delayed. On the slugging side, the ability for survivors to fully pick themselves up was also shelved. However, one of the changes did get through. Dying state recovery is now automatic, which sucks a little bit. Even if it is a quality of life feature, I think it may just contribute more to survivors zoning out when they're on the ground. However, it's still a lot better than the anti-slugging options we saw in the PTB, and I think the main complaint with this feature we all had was that the survivors could recover and crawl at the same time. On top of those changes, the survivors also got a new option to abandon the match if they have been downed and recovered twice in the match. While this is another good quality of life change for the survivors, being able to get out of games that Dead by Daylight developers perceive as being toxic, anything that promotes survivors leaving matches still makes me a little worried. We also saw a few other interesting killer adjustments. Oni got a nice buff. He now gets more blood orbs from hooking, even though the major slugging changes were reverted. It won't change his slug-heavy playstyle, but it's a good change. The ghoul's kidnap tech was fixed, which is a good thing, and they semi-reverted Clown, making his purple bottles a bit better and his yellow bottles a bit worse. The changes to the unknown from the PTB seem to have gone through as well, which are good all around, especially with the ability to look up and lob shots. For the Dark Lord, they tried to change Hellfire to be a bit slower with extra fire, but I don't see it having much impact except for making him feel a bit clunkier. They also tried to nerf his wolf form, but it's probably still his best. The wolf is just great all around, and I love playing as a pup myself. Also, the reduced sliding on his bats is a fantastic quality of life fix, and in a reoccurring trend, some of his most popular add-ons were nerfed. I know, shocker behavior from behavior. But the real story is in the mountain of other perk changes. First, the nerfs. Hope was nerfed to 5% haste, which is pretty good in my opinion as it was a powerful perk. Vigil no longer stacks, which is great, though it's still very strong and I don't see it disappearing from the meta anytime soon. Tenacity's crawl speed was reduced, which I think is kind of unnecessary given that the slugging changes were shelved. Deadman's Switch had his block duration cut by 15 seconds, but the silver lining is they didn't go through with further gutting Pain Resonance. Also, Monitor and Abuse was changed to be percentage based, which is kind of dumb in my opinion. It nerfs weak, small terror radius killers while buffing already powerful large terror radius ones. Now the buffs. Plot Twist now makes you recover 25% faster, which is not great news for the Power Struggle combo. Dark Arrogance was buffed, which is great for vault builds. Oppression was buffed pretty substantially, affecting one more generator with a smaller cooldown. Friendly Competition's activation time was doubled, and buffing anything related to gen speeds always makes me nervous. And most shockingly, Ruin was buffed, making gens regress at 150% speed. Don't get me started on how many changes Ruin has gotten over the years. And finally, the reworked-ish perks. Off the Record no longer gives endurance, but now hides scratch marks, leaning it into being a stealth perk more than a shield perk, which I think is pretty nice. Also, Leverage's application was changed for the killer side. It's easier for survivors to brute force their way through it, but now it lasts twice as long. We also have to talk about the map changes. Palette density has been updated across several realms, which really worries me if it's anything like the PTB, where the palette density was insane. We don't get specifics in the patch notes, but my guess is it'll be the same. My final verdict: this patch is a bit confusing, but it's a net positive. The shape rework is an incredible, healthy change. Yes, it gets rid of the shape we all know and love, and it gets rid of Tombstone Myers, which most of us are fans of, but this brings him up as a whole. I know people feel like it's dash slop, but this is behavior we're talking about. What did you expect? Generally speaking, he's a lot more powerful and viable now. The new characters are interesting as well, and I'm very excited to play with the Krasue. I'm also excited to play with the new Survivor, of course, but Survivors are mostly skins, so that's less impactful. But overall, the shadow of the delayed features looms pretty large, leaving a sense of fear that the developers will try massive tunneling and slugging changes again in the future. But that's just my take. What do you all think? Is the new shape rework a good direction? Are you disappointed that the big anti-tunneling, anti-slugging mechanics were delayed? Drop your thoughts down in the comments, and if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives and analysis on everything Dead by Daylight.